A psychiatrist attended to an elderly patient at the clinic. Upon hearing the patient's account, the psychiatrist with trembling hands immediately called the police. Dr. Ezra Holbrook's office was enveloped in a heavy silence, interrupted only by the soft ticking of the wall clock. The 58-year-old psychiatrist, with his graying hair and piercing blue eyes, adjusted his thin-framed glasses as he reviewed the notes he had brought home from his last patient. His hands, marked by time but still steady, held the pen with the precision of someone who had spent decades writing about the complexities of the human mind. Suddenly the phone rang, loud and persistent, as if sensing the urgency of the moment. Dr. Holbrook answered, his calm voice masking the apprehension that was beginning to form in his chest. "Dr. Holbrook, this is Elizabeth from Oakwood Clinic. We have an emergency with Iris Faulkner." The trembling voice of the head nurse echoed through the receiver. The doctor felt a chill run down his spine at the mention of Iris's name. "She asked us to call you. Actually, she screamed for you, doctor." "She is still screaming. We have never seen her like this before. It's as if something has awakened inside her. I believe the patient urgently needs her medication. She is not well." The psychiatrist abruptly stood up, knocking over his cup of cold coffee onto the papers scattered on his desk. Ignoring the mess, he grabbed his coat and car keys, his heart racing with every passing second. Iris Faulkner, the patient who had remained silent for years, was now screaming. She always refused to speak. Every session with her was a sea of silence. What could have triggered such a change? As he rushed to the door, Dr. Holbrook's thoughts were a torrent of concern and professional curiosity. "I'm on my way, Elizabeth. Do not let anyone into her room until I get there. And please, try to calm her if you can. Tell her I'm coming," he instructed, his voice firm but with an urgency he couldn't fully conceal. As Dr. Holbrook descended the stairs of the building, jumping 2 steps at a time, he couldn't stop thinking about Iris. She was a 65-year-old woman, confined to a wheelchair due to an accident in her youth. Her physical condition, however, never seemed to be her biggest problem. Her silence, deep and impenetrable, always intrigued the psychiatrist. For years he had tried to establish a connection, using every technique he knew to break through that invisible barrier Iris had built around herself. He recalled countless moments when the patient refused to speak, yet it seemed she expressed herself in the clinic's gardening classes. The flowers she cared for with such tenderness were always the most vibrant. He saw the patient's gentle side as she tended the garden, especially a white lily that grew in front of her room. And now, suddenly, this silent patient was screaming. What could have caused such a drastic change? "What are you trying to say, Iris? After all this time, what finally made you break your silence?" he muttered to himself as he got into his car. Driving through the city streets, Dr. Holbrook couldn't help but reflect on Iris's years of treatment. The silent sessions, the empty stares, the frustrated attempts at communication. Now, with this sudden change, he felt a mix of hope and apprehension. What would he find when he arrived at the clinic? "Whatever it is, Iris, I will do everything I can to help. I will stand by her no matter what it is. I know she has already faced a great barrier of silence, and this scream is a sign that there is still light at the end of the tunnel," he promised out loud, as if she could hear him. Finally, Dr. Holbrook arrived at Oakwood Clinic, parking his car haphazardly in the nearest spot to the entrance. As he rushed toward the building, he could hear muffled screams coming from inside. His heart pounded frantically in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Upon entering, he was greeted by Elizabeth, the head nurse, her face pale with worry. Before they could exchange words, a deafening crash echoed down the corridors, followed by even louder, more desperate screams. "My God, what is happening in there?" Dr. Holbrook asked, already moving toward Iris's room. Elizabeth followed, her voice trembling as she responded, "We don't know, doctor. She started screaming out of nowhere, and now it seems like she's tearing the room apart. There's nothing in there that could hurt her, but she needs your help right now." Dr. Holbrook rushed down the hallway, the sound of his footsteps drowned out by the ever-increasing volume of the screams coming from Iris's room. As he opened the door, the scene that greeted him was total chaos. Furniture was overturned, sheets were torn, and in the middle of it all stood Iris Faulkner, his long, silent patient, now a storm of emotions and movement. Her eyes, once empty, now shone with an intensity that was almost frightening. Upon seeing the doctor, Iris paused for a moment, her chest heaving with quick, shallow breaths. "Dr. Holbrook, please, you have to help me. He's going to silence me forever if you don't do something," Iris cried, her voice hoarse from all the screaming. The psychiatrist cautiously moved through the room, avoiding the broken objects scattered on the floor. His eyes never left Iris, watching her every movement, every expression. "Iris, I am here to help, but I need you to calm down and tell me what is going on. Why do you say someone will keep you here forever?" Iris gripped the arms of her wheelchair so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her eyes darted around the room frantically, as if searching for something or someone. When she spoke again, her voice was low and urgent, filled with fear and desperation. "My brother, Weston, he put me here. I am not sick, Dr. Holbrook. I never was. He made all of this up to take control of my life, my inheritance. But yesterday he said he would gain more if I were dead. He is going to silence me forever, doctor." A chill ran down the doctor's spine. Many patients resisted their confinement. Nothing Iris said was new to him. However, despite his medical skepticism, there was a clarity in Iris's eyes and words. If what she was saying was true, it meant years of misdiagnoses and unnecessary treatments. But why had she remained silent for so long? Dr. Holbrook moved closer, kneeling beside Iris's wheelchair so he could be at eye level with her. "Iris, this is a very serious accusation. Why didn't you say anything before? Why now?" Tears began to roll down Iris's face, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. "I was scared. Weston, he has connections, influence. He threatened me. He said that if I spoke, no one would believe me, that he would keep me sedated for the rest of my life. He always wanted my money, always greedy and selfish. Everything I am saying is true. You have spoken to him a few times. You know my records. You know what I'm saying is the truth. He took everything that is mine and left me here. But yesterday, what he said, I know he will do something. But no one will believe me. You are my only hope." Dr. Holbrook felt a wave of guilt and anger rising inside him. As a doctor, he knew Iris's entire medical history, and he had spoken to her brother several times. Everything she said was true. The brother was her legal guardian, controlling her fortune. Mistakes in diagnosis were rare, but Iris's silence had allowed her brother to paint the picture of her condition. Some patients have fantasies, delusions, but this does not seem like one of those cases. Something tells me I need to investigate further. It is my duty to protect and help Iris. If what she is saying is true, I have failed her terribly. But now is not the time for self-reflection. I need to act, and quickly. I have to help her, the psychiatrist thought before giving Iris a reassuring look. "Iris, I need to know more about this. We are going to solve this together, but I want you to tell me everything, every detail you can remember." Before Iris could respond, the door to the room burst open violently. Elizabeth, the head nurse, entered, breathless, her face a mask of panic. Her wide eyes scanned the scene of destruction before locking onto Dr. Holbrook and Iris. "Doctor, we have a problem. Weston Faulkner is on his way. He just called, demanding to see Iris immediately. He said he's parking his car right now." With no time left to further investigate the story, Dr. Holbrook, his hands trembling, dialed the police, a chill running down his spine. But before they could answer, the sound of heavy, angry footsteps echoed down the hallway. Weston Faulkner, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit and with a stormy expression, threw the door open, his eyes immediately locking on the small group gathered at Iris's door. Without hesitation, he advanced toward them, his booming voice filling the room. The doctor ended the call, ready to intervene if things escalated. "I got a call from one of the nurses saying my sister was causing trouble. I came right away to take her home," Weston demanded, his face red with anger. Dr. Holbrook stepped forward, placing himself between Weston and the door. His years of experience handling high-tension situations had prepared him for this moment. With a calm but firm voice, he addressed the enraged man. "Mr. Faulkner, I understand your concern, but we need to talk before any decisions are made." Weston paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Talk? About what?" "My sister is sick, doctor. She needs care that only I can provide. Look at the state of this room. You are not taking proper care of her. Now, Get out of my way." The room became a silent battlefield, with Dr. Holbrook standing his ground in front of the patient, while Weston seemed ready to push forward at any moment. Iris, too terrified to speak, clutched Elizabeth's arm, her eyes wide with fear. The nurse, sensing the patient's panic, tried to comfort her with gentle words, though her own voice trembled slightly. "Mr. Faulkner, new information has come to light regarding Iris's condition," Dr. Holbrook continued, his voice masking the urgency he felt. "As her doctor, it is my duty to thoroughly investigate before making any decisions about her treatment or discharge." Weston took an aggressive step toward the doctor, his face twisted with rage. "What new information? I have taken care of my sister for years. I know exactly what she needs. You have no idea what you're talking about, doctor." The tension in the hallway reached its peak. Dr. Holbrook could feel Weston's hot breath on his face, but he refused to back down. His years of training reminded him of the importance of staying calm in volatile situations. With a subtle movement, he positioned himself to fully block Weston's view into the room. "Mr. Faulkner, I understand your frustration, but as a doctor, I have an ethical duty to protect my patient. I cannot simply ignore." Dr. Holbrook was interrupted by the sound of something breaking inside the room. Taking advantage of the brief distraction, Weston shoved Dr. Holbrook aside forcefully, causing the doctor to stumble. Before anyone could react, Weston stormed into the room, his eyes immediately finding Iris. Iris's expression shifted from fear to determination as she saw her brother. "Weston, enough!" "I will not stay silent any longer," Iris shouted, her voice trembling but firm. "Dr. Holbrook, I have proof against Weston, in my old apartment, documents that show what he did, how he put me in here." Iris's revelation about the proof hit the room like a bomb, freezing everyone for a moment. Dr. Holbrook was the first to react, his medical mind quickly assessing the situation. In one swift movement, he placed himself between Iris and Weston, his voice steady and decisive. "Elizabeth, prepare Iris's wheelchair. We are leaving," Dr. Holbrook ordered, his eyes never leaving Weston. "Mr. Faulkner, I suggest you stay here. We have serious matters to investigate." Weston, momentarily stunned by Iris's announcement, quickly regained his aggressive stance. "You are not going anywhere with my sister, doctor. Can't you see she's delusional? This is just more proof that she needs constant supervision." Ignoring Weston's protests, Dr. Holbrook quickly helped Iris into her wheelchair. The doctor's heart raced, fully aware that every second was crucial. As he pushed Iris out of the room, a thought raced through his mind. If this evidence exists, it could change everything. But what if it's just another one of Iris's delusions? Am I risking my career for nothing? Elizabeth, her face a mix of concern and determination, looked at the doctor apprehensively. "Dr. Holbrook, I cannot allow you to take a patient out of the clinic without authorization. There are protocols, regulations." Dr. Holbrook interrupted her gently but firmly. "Elizabeth, I understand your position, but this is an emergency. Iris's safety could be at risk. I promise to take full responsibility for my actions." As they hurried down the hallway toward the elevator, Weston followed closely, his voice echoing off the walls. "You cannot do this. I am calling the police. I will sue this clinic. Dr. Holbrook, your career is finished." Inside the elevator, Dr. Holbrook frantically pressed the button for the ground floor, watching as Weston quickly approached. The doors began to close, but not fast enough. Weston managed to wedge his arm between them at the last second, forcing them to reopen. "Iris, for God's sake, stop this madness. You know I only want what's best for you. I have always taken care of you, haven't I?" Weston pleaded, his tone suddenly shifting to one of brotherly concern. Iris, visibly trembling, looked at her brother with a mixture of fear and determination. "No, Weston. You never took care of me. You trapped me here to control my life, my money. But that ends today." With a quick move, Dr. Holbrook shoved Weston out of the elevator, taking advantage of his moment of surprise. The doors finally closed, leaving Weston outside, his shouts muffled as the elevator descended. In the parking lot, Dr. Holbrook hurriedly pushed Iris's wheelchair toward his car. The doctor's heart pounded frantically in his chest, his mind racing with the implications of the decision he had just made. Helping a patient escape the clinic went against everything he had learned in his career, but the urgency in Iris's voice and Weston's aggression convinced him that this was his only option. As they approached the vehicle, Dr. Holbrook couldn't help but glance over his shoulder, fearing Weston would appear at any moment. "We need to hurry, Iris. Are you absolutely sure about this evidence?" Dr. Holbrook asked, his voice low and tense. Iris nodded vigorously, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. "Yes, Doctor, it's there. It will prove everything I said about Weston." Dr. Holbrook quickly helped Iris into the car, folding her wheelchair and placing it in the back seat. Within seconds, he was behind the wheel, starting the engine. As he maneuvered out of the parking spot, his eyes caught movement in the rearview mirror. Weston had just exited the clinic, his face red with anger as he saw the car pulling away. "Hold on, Iris. It looks like we'll have some unwanted company," Dr. Holbrook warned, speeding toward the exit of the parking lot. As Dr. Holbrook's car disappeared onto the street, Weston ran to his own vehicle, a murderous determination in his eyes. He was furious with the doctor's actions and ready to chase down the psychiatrist's car until he caught them. "They won't get away that easily. This ends today, one way or another," he muttered, starting the engine with a roar. Despite Weston's determination, the psychiatrist managed to lose him in the chaotic city traffic, taking advantage of timely moments to increase the distance between them. Minutes after they lost sight of Weston's car, Dr. Holbrook's vehicle came to a sudden stop in front of the building where Iris had lived before being institutionalized. The doctor's heart was still racing, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror for any sign of Weston. "Dr. Holbrook, what if Weston comes here?" Iris whispered, her voice trembling with anxiety. The doctor swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. "I will not let him hurt you, so try not to think about that now. Let's focus on finding the documents, Iris. Where exactly did you hide them?" As they reached the hallway, Iris, with trembling hands, pulled out a key hidden in a plant pot. The apartment, when they entered, was just as Iris had left it years ago, a dusty time capsule of a life interrupted. Furniture covered in white sheets looked like silent ghosts, mute witnesses to the secrets the place held. Iris led Dr. Holbrook to an old wooden chest in the corner of the living room. "It's there, under a false bottom in the chest. Weston never knew about this hiding place," she pointed out, her voice a mix of hope and fear. With urgency, Dr. Holbrook opened the chest, his hands slightly trembling as he removed layers of old clothes and memories. He found the false bottom and lifted it, his heart racing with anticipation. But to his and Iris's horror, the secret compartment was empty. There were no documents, no evidence, only an empty space that seemed to mock their hopes. "It cannot be. I put the evidence here, I am sure of it." "Dr. Holbrook, you have to believe me," Iris muttered, panic clear in her voice. The doctor turned to Iris, seeing the desperation in her eyes. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be fine, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he began thinking about their options, none of which seemed promising. "Iris, without those documents, there's not much I can do. Your brother is your legal guardian, and everything I'm doing could cost me my job. I cannot leave you in danger, but we need help. We need to go to the police," Dr. Holbrook encouraged, trying to stay calm. With that, Dr. Holbrook guided Iris out of the apartment, his heart heavy with the decision to take her to the police station. The journey was tense, with Iris alternating between moments of determination and palpable fear. When they arrived, the doctor helped Iris out of the car, noticing how she trembled slightly with nervousness. They entered the station, the usual hum of activity quieting briefly as the officers noticed their unusual arrival. "Do not worry, Iris. We'll tell our story and they'll understand," Dr. Holbrook whispered, trying to sound more confident than he felt. A police officer directed them to the main counter, where Dr. Holbrook began explaining the situation. As he spoke, he noticed the skeptical looks from some of the officers. However, a young policewoman seemed more sympathetic, her eyes softening as she listened to Iris's account. But before they could delve further into the conversation, the police chief, a middle-aged man with a stern expression, listened to the report with growing impatience. When Dr. Holbrook finished, the oppressive silence that followed weighed heavily in the room. The chief sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Doctor, are you aware of the seriousness of your actions? Kidnapping, interference in medical treatment. "This could ruin your career," the chief said, his voice heavy with disapproval. Dr. Holbrook felt a knot form in his stomach. "That's not what is happening here. We are asking for help, for an investigation." The chief interrupted him with a sharp gesture. "She is your psychiatric patient. Your decisions as a doctor are, at the very least, questionable. I am calling Mrs. Faulkner's brother right now. He will come and take her home, where she will receive the proper treatment from another professional who doesn't believe in the delusions of a patient." As the chief made the call, Dr. Holbrook watched Iris, seeing the fear growing in her eyes. He wanted to protect her, but he felt he was losing control of the situation rapidly. "They cannot do this. Please don't send me back to him," Iris whispered, her voice trembling. The wait for Weston's arrival was agonizing. Dr. Holbrook tried to argue further, but his words fell on deaf ears. When Weston finally arrived at the station, his expression was a mixture of brotherly concern and relief that the doctor suspected was fake. "Iris, dear, I'm so happy to see you. Let's go home. Everything is fine now," Weston said, his voice syrupy. The chief turned to Dr. Holbrook, his tone now softer, but still filled with warning. "Doctor, Mr. Faulkner has agreed not to press charges against you. I suggest you be grateful for this kindness and not get involved in this matter any further." Dr. Holbrook felt a sudden sense of dread. Weston doesn't want to involve the police because he has something to hide. He doesn't want to get caught. Everything Iris says is the absolute truth, he thought. But before he could voice these concerns, Weston was already leading Iris out of the station. "Somehow I will prove the truth and help her," Dr. Holbrook thought, watching helplessly as Iris was taken away. As Weston and Iris left, the doctor noticed the glance from the young policewoman who had seemed more receptive earlier. There was something in her eyes, doubt, maybe even a hint of suspicion. Dr. Holbrook felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, he had found an unexpected ally in this fight for the truth and for Iris's freedom. With that, Dr. Holbrook returned to the clinic, his body exhausted but his mind in turmoil. The silence of the hallways contrasted sharply with the internal chaos he felt. Sitting in his office, staring at the pile of patient files, he couldn't shake the image of Iris's terrified face as Weston led her away. The sense of failure consumed him, gnawing at his usually composed professionalism. With trembling hands, he flipped through Iris's file, his eyes landing on Weston's address. A dangerous idea began to take shape in his mind. "I cannot just abandon her. Even if it costs me my career, I need to make sure she is safe," he murmured to himself, the weight of his decision already heavy on his shoulders. As day turned to night, Dr. Holbrook found himself driving towards Weston's house, his heart pounding in his chest. He parked at a safe distance, observing the house for a few minutes. The lights were off, except for a faint glow in one of the ground floor windows. With each step towards the house, he felt the weight of his actions. It wasn't just his career on the line, but potentially his freedom as well. Still, the image of Iris, vulnerable and scared, pushed him forward. "I'm doing the right thing. I cannot leave her at Weston's mercy," he thought, trying to steady his nerves. With surprising skill for someone inexperienced in breaking and entering, Dr. Holbrook managed to get inside the house. The interior was silent, only the ticking of a clock breaking the oppressive quiet. He moved cautiously, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Reaching a room on the ground floor, he heard a soft sob. His heart leapt as he opened the door and saw Iris in her wheelchair, curled up in a corner. Her red, tear-stained eyes widened in recognition and relief. "Dr. Holbrook, what are you doing here, my brother? He will report you. You will be arrested. Please leave. You could ruin yourself by helping me. I don't want you to suffer the consequences for being so kind to me," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. "I am here to get you out, Iris. I cannot leave you in this situation." "Come on, we need to be quick and quiet," he replied, his voice low but resolute. As he prepared to move Iris's wheelchair, Dr. Holbrook noticed dark marks on her arms, partially hidden by the sleeves of her nightgown. His stomach clenched as he realized they were fresh bruises. "Iris, what happened? Did he hurt you?" he asked, his voice barely containing his rising anger. Iris quickly pulled down her sleeves, avoiding his gaze. "Please, Dr. Holbrook, do not get involved any further. Weston is dangerous. You have no idea what he is capable of. I cannot bear the thought of you getting hurt because of me." With a heavy heart but even more determination, Dr. Holbrook unlocked the wheels of Iris's chair and guided her out of the room. He would not allow anyone to harm such a kind woman. Every creak of the wooden floor felt like thunder in his hypersensitive ears. They moved slowly down the hallway, freedom so close they could almost taste it. But as they opened the front door, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from upstairs. Weston was awake. "Quick!" Dr. Holbrook whispered urgently, pushing Iris's chair as fast as he could toward the car. He had just managed to get Iris into the passenger seat and fold her wheelchair into the back when they saw Weston running out of the house, shouting furiously. Dr. Holbrook started the car and sped off, the tires screeching on the asphalt. In the rearview mirror, he saw Weston jump into his own car, starting a frantic chase through the dark streets of the city. "Hold on, Iris. I am not going to let him catch you again. We will make the police believe you. They have to believe. They will see these bruises and be forced to intervene. No one should go through something like this. I do not care if I get arrested or lose my license. I cannot ignore someone going through abuse. It goes against everything I believe in, not just as a doctor, but as a human being. The consequences scare me less than the guilt I would feel for turning my back on you. I have to help you, even if I lose everything to do it. I won't give up until you are safe," Dr. Holbrook said, his voice tense as he sharply maneuvered around a curve. Dr. Holbrook drove with an intensity he had never felt before, his eyes constantly shifting between the road ahead and the rearview mirror, where Weston was following far too closely. "Do you think we can lose him again?" Iris asked, her eyes also fixed on the side mirror. Dr. Holbrook didn't answer immediately, his mind racing through their options. The city lights blurred by in streaks of color as they navigated through the streets, each turn and traffic light offering a chance to shake off their pursuer. But the relief was short-lived. Weston had closed the distance and was now dangerously close. Dr. Holbrook felt a knot tighten in his stomach, but he maintained his composure, not wanting to alarm Iris further. "Do not panic, Iris. I will try to lose him." "Hold on," he said, his voice calm, hiding the storm brewing inside him. With a sharp turn, Dr. Holbrook swerved down a side street, the tires screeching against the pavement. Weston followed, relentless in his pursuit. The streets grew more unfamiliar as Dr. Holbrook drove farther away from the city center, desperately searching for an escape route. He glanced at the fuel gauge, his alarm growing as he saw it was dangerously close to empty. "Dr. Holbrook, what if we can't escape? What will Weston do to us?" Iris asked, her voice trembling. The doctor gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I will not let him hurt you, Iris. I promise." The chase continued through the increasingly deserted streets on the outskirts of the city. Dr. Holbrook made sharp turns, zigzagged through alleyways, doing everything he could to lose Weston. But their pursuer was persistent, always reappearing in the rearview mirror like a relentless phantom. The stress of the situation was beginning to take its toll. Dr. Holbrook could feel his focus slipping, his exhausted body protesting against the constant rush of adrenaline. "We cannot keep this up forever. We need a plan, and fast," he thought, as desperation began to set in. That's when the unthinkable happened. The car engine sputtered once, twice, and then died completely. Dr. Holbrook wrestled with the steering wheel as the vehicle lost speed, finally coming to a stop on the side of a deserted road. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by their labored breathing and the distant yet steadily approaching sound of Weston's car. "No, no, no," Dr. Holbrook muttered, turning the key over and over. But the engine remained stubbornly silent. Iris looked at him, the terror clear in her eyes. "What are we going to do now, Doctor?" "Weston will catch up to us any minute," she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Holbrook frantically scanned the area, his eyes catching the silhouette of an abandoned gas station just a few yards away. Without hesitation, he jumped out of the car and quickly helped Iris, lifting her into his arms. She was heavy, but the adrenaline pushed him forward. He was careful not to touch her recent bruises, but he knew Weston would catch up with them easily. They moved as quickly as possible toward the station, the oppressive silence of the night feeding their fears that Weston could appear at any moment. "Doctor, we cannot keep going like this. I am slowing you down. Maybe it would be better if you left me here and got help, Iris whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Holbrook shook his head vigorously, never slowing his pace. Don't even think about it, Iris. We are in this together until the end. When they reached the station, Dr. Holbrook tried the door of the convenience store, finding it surprisingly unlocked. They hurried inside, and the doctor gently shut the door behind them with a soft click. The interior was dark and dusty, with empty shelves casting ghostly shadows in the dim light. Dr. Holbrook gently placed Iris on the floor, propped up against the counter, and began frantically searching for a phone or any means of communication. I need to call for help. I will call the police. I know they will arrest me for kidnapping you, but at least they will see what your brother did to you and take action. I don't care if I go to jail, as long as it means he won't hurt you again, he murmured, more to himself than to Iris. His hands shook as he rummaged through his pockets, finally finding his cell phone. He breathed a sigh of relief, only for his heart to sink when he saw the dreaded message, "No signal." Dr. Holbrook looked at Iris, the despair beginning to show in his eyes. "The phone has no signal here. We are completely cut off, Iris. Completely isolated," he said, his voice low and tense. Iris reached out, touching the doctor's arm in a gesture of comfort. "We will think of something, doctor. We cannot give up now." The silence that followed was oppressive, broken only by the occasional sound of wind blowing through the cracks of the old building. Dr. Holbrook shifted uneasily, alternating between watching the window and thinking of a way to go to the police without causing more trouble for himself. Every minute that passed heightened the tension, the feeling that they were sitting ducks, waiting for the hunter to find them. "Dr. Holbrook, what if Weston finds us here? We have nowhere to go." "He must have seen the car on the road by now, and he is probably looking for us," Iris whispered after what seemed like an eternity. The doctor knelt beside her, holding her trembling hands. "I will not let him take you back, Iris. We are going to get through this together no matter what." At that moment, the sound of an engine cut through the night. Bright headlights suddenly flooded the interior of the abandoned station, bathing Dr. Holbrook and Iris in a blinding light. They instinctively ducked, unsure if this new development was a blessing or a curse. "My God, who could that be?" Iris gasped, her eyes wide with fear and hope. Dr. Holbrook reacted instinctively, pulling Iris behind the counter and crouching beside her. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to figure out the source of the headlights. It could not be Weston. The engine sounded different. With a quick movement, he peeked through the dusty window and saw something that made him breathe a sigh of relief. A police car. "It's the police, Iris. This could be our chance to get you out of this situation," he whispered, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Wasting no time, Dr. Holbrook lifted Iris in his arms and rushed outside the abandoned station. The cold night air hit them like a wave, but they barely noticed, focused on reaching the approaching police vehicle. As they reached the side of the road, the car stopped, and a familiar figure stepped out. The detective who had looked at them earlier at the station, the one who had seemed to believe them. "Sir? Ma'am? I received a call about speeding cars and suspicious activity in this area." The detective's voice was a mix of surprise and caution. Dr. Holbrook, panting from carrying his patient, turned to the detective with a determined look. "Detective, I do not know if you remember me. Earlier we came to the station where you work. My name is Dr. Holbrook and we need your help. We are in trouble." The detective's expression was skeptical as her eyes moved between the exhausted doctor and the visibly shaken patient. "Yes, I remember you. But wasn't she supposed to be at her brother's house? What is going on here? Did you kidnap her?" she asked, her hand moving toward her phone to call for backup. Dr. Holbrook knew they only had one chance to convince the detective. He looked at Iris, encouraging her with a nod. "Yes, detective, I did this to keep the patient safe, and I would do it all again. Iris, tell her everything." Iris took a deep breath, gathering all her courage. Her eyes met Detective Winters, and she began to speak. Her voice was shaky at first, but grew stronger with each word. She explained the years of Weston's manipulation, how he had unjustly institutionalized her to control her inheritance, the threats, and the constant fear. She showed the bruises her brother had caused recently after they left the police station. Dr. Holbrook watched closely, noticing how Winter's expression shifted subtly from skepticism to concern. "I know it sounds crazy, Detective," Iris finished, tears glistening in her eyes. "But I swear it's the truth. Dr. Holbrook is the first person in years who has really listened to me, who believed me. Do not arrest him. He is only trying to help me. But no one believes me, not after my brother made it look like I had mental disorders." Winters stayed silent for a moment, processing everything she had heard. Her training inclined her to be skeptical, but there was something about Iris's story, about Dr. Holbrook's urgency, that made her pause. "This is a very serious accusation, Mrs. Faulkner. Do you have any evidence to back up these claims?" Before Iris could answer, the sound of screeching tires cut through the night. A familiar car appeared around the bend in the road, braking sharply just a few meters from where they stood. Dr. Holbrook's heart sank as he saw Weston Faulkner step out of the vehicle, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "Iris!" Weston shouted, storming toward the group. "Thank God I found you. You have no idea how worried I've been. I saw the doctor's car on the road and searched the area for you. Please let me help you." Dr. Holbrook instinctively stepped between Iris and Weston, but it was Detective Winters who moved forward, her hand resting casually on the holster of her gun. "Mr. Faulkner, I presume." "I am Detective Winters. I believe we have much to discuss." Weston stopped, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. When he spoke again, his voice was laced with a forced calm that barely concealed his anger. "Detective, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. My sister is unwell and this doctor kidnapped her from my own home. It seems both of them have issues, but this man has gone too far." The tension in the air was palpable. Dr. Holbrook could feel Iris trembling beside him as the detective looked from Weston to Iris, clearly trying to decide how to proceed. The doctor knew the next few moments could determine Iris's fate. "Detective Winters," Dr. Holbrook said, his voice low but steady, "please do not let him be alone with Iris. Her life may depend on it." Detective Winters, sensing the rising tension, decided to take control of the situation. She positioned herself strategically close to the three, her sharp eyes assessing every movement. "All right, everyone calm down," she said, her voice firm and authoritative. "Mr. Faulkner, Dr. Holbrook, please step back. Mrs. Faulkner, are you able to speak?" Weston stepped forward, his face a mask of brotherly concern. "Detective, my sister is not mentally capable of—" "Silence!" Winters cut him off sharply. "Mr. Faulkner, I will have to ask you to step back or I will be forced to detain you for obstruction." Weston backed off, but his eyes flashed with anger. He turned to Iris, his voice low and threatening. "Think carefully about what you are going to say, little sister. Remember our family secrets. If you talk, there is no going back. Everything will come out. Everything." Dr. Holbrook felt a chill run down his spine at Weston's veiled threat. He looked at Iris, seeing the conflict in her eyes. For a moment it seemed like she might buckle under the pressure, but then something shifted in Iris's expression. A fierce determination took hold in her eyes, and she straightened her shoulders, looking directly at Weston. "Enough, Weston," she said, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength with every word. "I will not live in fear anymore. I do not care what you threaten to expose. The truth needs to come out." Iris turned to Detective Winters, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "Detective, everything started 10 years ago when our parents died in a car accident. Weston and I inherited a significant fortune, but there was a clause in the will. I was given full control of the family finances. At first, everything seemed fine. I managed everything, but Weston offered to help with the business. Shortly after, I began to notice discrepancies in the accounts, large sums of money disappearing. When I confronted Weston, he became furious. That was the first time I saw the monster behind the protective brother mask. He began drugging me slowly, little by little, sleeping pills at first, then antidepressants that I did not need. I became confused, disoriented. Weston told everyone that I was having a nervous breakdown because of our parents' death. One day I woke up in that clinic. Weston had convinced the doctors, with forged reports and his manipulative charm, that I was a danger to myself. He forged my signature on voluntary commitment papers. That way he became legally responsible for me and consequently in control of our family's fortune. I never cared about the money. I always wanted to live a simple life. My parents knew that, which is why they left me as the administrator. But my brother could not accept that, and he found a way to have me institutionalized. Years passed. I tried to speak up, but who would believe a psychiatric patient over the respectable Weston Faulkner? The drugs kept me docile, confused. I almost believed I was crazy. But a few weeks ago, a new nurse made a mistake with my medication. For the first time in years, my mind was clear. I started to remember, to put the pieces together. I realized I had to act, or I would spend the rest of my life in that clinic while Weston drained my inheritance. Dr. Holbrook was the first person who really listened to me, who believed me. He risked everything to help me. Weston is not the loving brother he pretends to be. He is a thief, a manipulator. He stole my life, my freedom, all because of greed. Detective, I know it is hard to believe. I know I probably seem like just another disturbed patient, but I swear on my parents' memory I am telling the truth. Weston stole years of my life. Please do not let him take any more. Iris finished her account, tears silently streaming down her face. A heavy silence fell over the group, broken only by the distant sound of crickets in the night. Detective Winters remained quiet for a few moments, her gaze shifting between Iris, Dr. Holbrook, and Weston. The tension in the air was palpable, each second stretching into what felt like an eternity. Finally, she made her decision. All right, all of you are coming with me to the station now. We need to file these charges formally and investigate this further, Winters announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. Dr. Holbrook felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Finally, someone is listening to us. But will it be enough to help Iris? He thought. As they headed towards the cars, Iris gasped, her eyes widening with a sudden realization. Wait, I know where Weston might have hidden the evidence, she exclaimed, her voice trembling with excitement. He could have hidden everything in the family safe. Detective Winters turned sharply, her attention fully focused on Iris. Where, Mrs. Faulkner? Where is the evidence? Iris closed her eyes, concentrating intensely. The safe is in our father's office. There is a hidden safe behind his portrait. The combination. It's our mother's birth date. Weston used to hide everything there before he started drugging me. Weston, who had so far maintained a facade of indignation, visibly paled. This is absurd. Iris is clearly delusional. We cannot give any credibility to these fantasies. Dr. Holbrook watched the scene unfold, his heart racing with the possibility of finally proving Iris's innocence. Detective, please, we need to check this immediately, he urged. Winters nodded decisively. Let's head to the station. From there I will send a team to verify this information. If what Mrs. Faulkner says is true, we will have a lot to discuss, Mr. Faulkner. At the station, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Iris was taken to an interrogation room with Dr. Holbrook, while Weston was kept separately, under the watchful eye of an officer. Detective Winters was coordinating the operation, dispatching a team to the address Iris had provided. The hours that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. Dr. Holbrook held Iris's hand, offering silent support as they waited for news. It's going to be all right, Iris. The truth will come out, I promise, he murmured. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door to the room opened. Detective Winters entered, her face professional, but her eyes shone with a mixture of surprise and determination. Mrs. Faulkner, we just received confirmation. The evidence was found exactly where you said it would be. Bank statements, forged documents, even incriminating recordings. It's all there. Your brother was careless, likely thinking he could keep you silent or discredit your claims, she began, her voice calm but firm. Iris let out a sob of relief, years of tension and fear finally dissolving. Dr. Holbrook felt his own eyes fill with tears, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment. What happens now? Iris asked, her voice shaky but filled with hope. Detective Winters allowed herself a small smile. Now, Mrs. Faulkner, your brother will be arrested and charged with fraud, document forgery and abuse. You are free. You have a long road of recovery ahead, but you will be safe. As they watched Weston being led away in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence until the end, Dr. Holbrook turned to Iris, seeing in her the strength and determination he always knew she had. "It's over, Iris. You did it." "You are free," he said softly. Iris smiled through her tears, squeezing the doctor's hand. "Thank you, Dr. Holbrook, for believing in me when no one else did, for risking so much to help me." And so as the sun rose on the horizon, marking the beginning of a new day, Iris Faulkner finally saw the end of her long nightmare, ready to start her life anew with the truth revealed and justice served. 6 months had passed since the night that changed everything. It was a sunny autumn afternoon when Iris Faulkner arrived at Dr. Holbrook's office. Her face, once marked by fear and confusion, now displayed a serenity and determination the doctor barely recognized. Dr. Holbrook greeted her with a warm smile, immediately noticing the positive changes in his former patient. Iris looked healthier, stronger, both physically and emotionally. They greeted each other not as doctor and patient, but as two friends who had weathered a storm together and come out the other side unscathed. "Dr. Holbrook, I came here today to say thank you. I know I have said it before, but it feels like it will never be enough. You not only believed in me, but you risked everything to help me," Iris said, her voice firm and clear. The doctor listened attentively, touched by Iris's words. She continued, "In the past few months, I have worked hard to rebuild my life. I regained control of my finances, started therapy with a new psychologist, and even had more time to tend to my garden, something I love doing. Weston remains in prison, facing the consequences of his actions, and although that still brings me pain at times, I know it is just." Iris paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "But most importantly, Doctor, I got my voice back. My identity. When I think about how I used to be, silenced and confused, I can hardly believe the transformation. And all of this began with you, with your willingness to listen and believe." Dr. Holbrook felt his eyes fill with tears. He reached out, gently holding Iris's hand. "You did all the hard work, Iris. I just offered the support you deserved from the start. I even received a medal from the police for what I did, but honestly, I am just happy knowing that you are safe and well." Iris smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "I still have a long road ahead." They talked for a while longer, with Iris sharing her plans for the future, including her desire to use her experience to help others and to change the world by doing good. He had entered this profession to make a difference, and there stood the living proof that sometimes helping someone and believing in them can change everything. Iris's case had changed him too, making him more attentive, more willing to question and investigate. He knew he would carry this lesson with him for the rest of his career. That night, sitting in his office, Dr. Holbrook reflected on the journey they had traveled. The road had been long and difficult, but the outcome, seeing Iris free, healthy, and hopeful, made it all worthwhile. With a smile, he turned back to his notes, ready to help other patients find their way, always remembering that sometimes healing begins simply with the act of listening. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing you exciting stories almost every day. Do not miss the next surprising narrative that is about to appear on your screen. We are incredibly grateful to have you here with us. Now, you can click on the links appearing on your screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, filled with valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.